On today's show we have our two representatives on behalf of the Free Will Defence, one of whom will support the strengths and the other supporting the weaknesses of the theodicy. We will be carefully analysing the various sides and concluding on my evaluation. Our strengths representative is Emily. And our weaknesses representative is Faye. We will begin with our opening statement from the strengths representative.
The Free Will Defence focuses on what makes us truly human, free will. This is an essential characteristic of our humanity. It makes us different from other species on our planet, and by removing it we would no longer be human beings. Furthermore, if we use it well and do not abuse it, it brings us unity with God. It also gives the opportunity to prove oneself with the reward of spending an eternity of happiness in heaven, which itself outweighs all suffering on earth. The theodicy is logically consistent and coherent, blaming moral evil on us instead of God. Moral evil is a result of the misuse of free will, and this makes it a convincing argument. It doesn't contradict itself, and it fits with what we already know.
This point can be dismissed by William Rowe. Rowe argues many examples of natural evil produce no greater good for anyone. They are totally unnecessary. An example would be a deer dying slowly within a forest fire. There is no obvious good that is gained by gradual death of the animal, rather than a quick one, making the suffering futile. The typical reason for first-order bad, such as pain, is that it allows us to achieve second-order goods, such as empathy and compassion. Rowe uses these terms to explain how a theist may defend suffering in order to achieve the greater good. However, when this isn't apparent and suffering cannot be justified, this means for Rowe that the greater the amount of unnecessary and extreme suffering, the less likely God exists.
While it's true that some suffering, such as the deer dying slowly and painfully in a forest fire, may not give us the chance to develop second-order goods, but the Free Will Defence for Kierkegaard centres on the idea that if we are to have a genuine relationship with God, we must be able to make our own decisions and choose to love Him ourselves, using our free will without His interference. If he were to intervene and help this deer, we would no longer have freedom over whether we believe in Him. We feel compelled to do so because He has done such a benevolent thing. This is illustrated well by Kierkegaard's parable of the king and the peasant girl, which convincingly addresses the logical problem of evil because it demonstrates that some instances of evil exist in order for us to doubt God's existence, so we're able to choose to love Him freely. This means God cannot use His powers to force or persuade us. Also, for instances of extreme moral evil such as the Holocaust, if God intervenes, any doubts we have in His existence are removed. These doubts are necessary to make sure our relationship with God is truly genuine. Imagine if someone made the choice to shoot someone else, and as the bullet was in mid-flight, God, with His omnipotence, chose to stop the bullet. We would feel inclined to believe in Him, limiting our choices, making it not truly free. Additionally, this weakness is only relevant to the evidential problem. Yet Kierkegaard's defence isn't supposed to be entirely successful against the evidential problem, as his view of belief in God is that it must be open to doubt, belief in faith.
J.L. Mackie would respond to this by undermining one of the most basic assumptions of the free will defence, that free will entails the potential for evil. Mackie suggests that God could have created a world in which humanity has freedom of choice but always chooses good. He quotes that there was open to him, God, the obvious better possibility of making beings who would act freely but always go right. Clearly his failure to avail himself of the possibility is inconsistent with his being both omnipotent and wholly good. This links back to the parable of the king and the peasant girl. By analogy, the peasant girl could love this king well, knowing he was the king. The fact he didn't therefore depicts that God is at least partly, if not fully, responsible for moral evil.
I beg to differ. If God designed us so that we always freely choose to do the right thing, this would remove our ability to have a genuine choice of two or more options. This is because choice requires options. It's logically contradictory to say we have a choice when there is only one possible action. The option to do wrong would no longer be possible, so we would not have free will. This reduces us to mere robots, unable to think and choose independently. Additionally, the point on the parable is true, by analogy, but Kierkegaard would respond by saying for it to be genuine love, it was best she fell for the king's heart as opposed to his power. linked to God, it is best we build a genuine relationship on our choice to believe, rather than him presenting himself with his omniscience, persuading us to believe when we didn't truly before.
Determinists have the view that every human choice and action is nothing more than an effect of the prior cause. If our choices are determined, this makes free will an illusion, so it cannot be used as an explanation of why God allows evil to occur. It too means those who enter heaven is predetermined, meaning God is favouring some over others, removing the sense of his benevolence for all. Determinists too believe in the causal closure of the physical world, meaning every physical event has a fully physical cause. Thus, if we know everything about a physical situation, we can predict it with 100% accuracy. This means there is no way to change the future, as it is already shaped. This again completely removes the idea that we have free will, as the decisions we make are already decided. This is convincing, as the responsibility of moral evil must lie within an omniscient God, as opposed to a freely choosing humanity.
Determinism and predestination are incompatible with free will. Free will is an essential part of who we are and our personal identity, and implies that when we choose something, there is more than one possible outcome. If it is a free choice, then our action will not have already been decided. The fact only some enter heaven shows signs of God's compassion, as he is still willing to forgive those who use their free will correctly. Swinburne responds to the weaknesses presented to the free will defence by saying natural evil increases overall good by providing chances to develop oneself. It teaches us about the effects of evil and gives us opportunities to show courage and achieve second-order goods, such as compassion and empathy. Swinburne states that death is necessary as a limit to life. Without it, we wouldn't take responsibility for any of our actions. Death limits the misuse of free will, which can lead to moral evil. This is convincing, as we have empirical evidence that death occurs here on Earth, and if the concepts of death and free will are coherent, in the eyes of Swinburne, this strengthens his theodicy.
What about empirical evidence? There is no proof that backs up the free will defence. It can therefore be completely dismissed by all scientists. Also, what about an atheist? For them, they do not require free will to create a genuine relationship with God, as they do not believe. This is convincing, as this means that the theory cannot be applied to the whole of humanity.
The fact that there is no empirical evidence doesn't dismiss the theory. Scientific understanding of the free will defence isn't necessarily the correct tool to justify the theodicy. What cannot be explained is clearly out of society's current understanding, and something only an omniscient God can truly comprehend. Science doesn't present any evidence to disprove the theory, so it isn't acceptable to leave it as a valid weakness. Free will is too, arguably, not an empirical hypothesis. There is no evidence, even in principle, that could be used to either confirm or deny it. Additionally, the fact atheism exists actually benefits the free will defence. Kierkegaard and Swinburne both emphasise free will requires a real choice, meaning the choice to not believe in God is just as much of an option as it is to be a theist. This is convincing, as it means the theory is applicable to the whole of humanity, making it logically consistent for all. There is also a distinct difference between knowing with certainty or proof to saying it is rational to believe in something. I think it's fair to say it is rational to accept the free will defence.
Thank you for both of your views on the free will defence. From what I've heard, there is a fairly balanced argument on both sides. Would you both now please choose your strongest argument, and I'll attempt to evaluate the two at the end, so hopefully we can come to a conclusion on the strongest view.
I believe my strongest argument against the free will defence is Rowe's response. It is impossible to justify every instance of suffering, especially the extremes, such as the Holocaust. Why did so many have to die in order to attain the greater good? Is it even clear that there was any greater good in this example? I think not. Rowe would argue the same result could have been achieved with less suffering.
I believe my strongest argument is the benefits that free will offers us. It's an essential characteristic of humanity and an opportunity to enter heaven. It too substantially outweighs the risk of suffering and evil.
Okay, so firstly, Rowe's argument against the free will defence highlights its inability to justify all instances of natural evil. I believe this is convincing because there must be numerous examples throughout history where humans and animals alike have suffered in extreme ways. no greater good can be directly linked, and therefore it isn't justified. How can free will be responsible for what is natural and out of our control, yet causes extensive suffering? Even for examples such as a tsunami where thousands lose their lives, yet those who survive can give the opportunity to express empathy and compassion and come together as a community in the fight for justice, there still appears to be no reason for such a great extent of suffering. Similar goods could have been achieved with less suffering, whether this means a smaller tsunami or fewer deaths. The strengths representative could respond to this by saying there is no black or white line explicitly depicting what the right level of suffering should result in order to gain the maximum greater good for a situation. It is what is classed as a grey area, making it an unfair point. The ability to comprehend the necessary amount of suffering to achieve some greater good is clearly beyond our current understanding. On the other hand, the strongest argument justifying the free will defence is that the free will allows us to do what the free will allows us to do, and the opportunities it creates. It differentiates us from robots and makes us human. This is convincing as it fits with one's idea of personal identity. If we have a genuine choice available to us every time, it shapes us into people we are by the choices we make. This is comforting for humanity, as it allows us to control the person we become or the person we aspire to be. Also, Rowe himself rationalises in the book The Problem of Evil that by preventing a situation of intense human or animal suffering, it potentially could result in a greater good lost or an evil of equal or worse quantity permitted. Although Rowe himself doesn't appreciate the free will defence, this idea could be used to justify your point. If God was to prevent a situation of intense human or animal suffering, there is a chance an evil or vaster quantity could result. Thus, it is better to allow the situation to happen in the first place to avoid the loss of a greater good. For whatever the extent of an evil act, first or second order, etc., it is guaranteed a higher good will result. For example, a first order bad, such as pain, a second order good, such happens. Whether it be indirectly or directly, everything happens for a reason. This is convincing as it justifies why most evil situations, both moral and natural, happen. For those that appear to result in no great good, if God intervened, he would be limiting one's free choice, as we would be inclined to become theist, removing a genuine relationship that we would have chosen for ourselves. It is important that we have free will, as for those who use it well will be rewarded with the opportunity to enter heaven at death, where they can enjoy eternal happiness. The fact this is a coherent theodicy means that it is convincing enough that we can rationally accept it as true. Now, unfortunately, we have run out of time, so I'll conclude in next week's episode. For now, I would like to thank my guests today. Do join us again. Goodbye.